No.
Yeah. Thank you for coming to our session. My name is Kenichi Kuroiwa, and the presentation is 15 minutes, and just after the presentation, we have a 5-minute question discussion session. And the first presenter is Han-Bin Lee, University of California, Davis. Yeah.
Thank you very much for the introduction. And my name is Han-Bin Lee, and I'm a PhD student at UC Davis. I am currently working with Rich Sexton and Dan Sumner for this project. We studied the impact of California's pork regulations of Proposition 12. The proposition was registered by California voters in 2018, and it requires that uncooked cuts of pork sold in California must come from mother pigs confined with at least 24 square feet per sow of usable floor space. This regulation applies for only California in terms of pork purchase, but hog and pork producers even outside California concerned about some negative effects of the regulation because the hog and pork supply chain is integrated across Canada and the United States. And also California itself has almost no hog production and import pork from outside California. That's why National Pork Producer Councils sued the California Secretary of Agriculture, claiming that that regulation will affect negatively producers outside California. And the Supreme Court accepted their petition, and now they review whether that regulation is against the Commerce Clause in the Constitution. Given this background, we try to quantify the changes in prices and quantities of hogs and pork products in California and also outside California. The left-hand side picture shows typical mother pigs housing practices in North America. As you can see, individual mother pigs are confined in a very small cage, and which is often called gestation crate and also gestation store. And such a small cage cannot be used for accessing the California market for the proposition. And after conversations with producers, we learned that the group housing system, as shown in the other picture, is a promising way for compliance with California standards. Here, I want to emphasize that the proposition is not just about the minimum space requirement. Actually, it limits time that individual mother pigs are allowed to be apart from the group or some medical reasons or some other veterinary reasons. And according to producers, so that is a real problem. And they argue that because of that, there is a substantial productivity loss. The farm compliance costs consist of one-time conversion costs and also incremental variable costs. The incremental variable costs mainly come from aggressive behaviors of mother pigs in group housing systems. What I mean is the mother pigs actually fight each other to get more feed and to be a higher position in the social hierarchy among the pigs. According to producers, actually it is a real problem, and they claim more labor and more services are needed to deal with such aggressive behaviors, which contribute to various operating costs. And based on conversations with producers and also based on production cost data of universities and USDA, we assessed the incremental variable cost would be about $2 per sow, or in terms of retail weight equivalent, it would be about $1.20 per hundredweight. In terms of one-time conversion cost, this slide will help you. Before explaining it, I want to suggest two facts in the hog and hog and pork supply chain in North America. One fact is that only about 8% of the North American hog production is needed to satisfy the California pork demand after considering the pork trade. Another fact is that about 30% of the hog production is now under group housing system. And the group housing system has lower conversion costs compared to typical store housing systems, which is a standard in the industry. Because of that, we expect most converters will come from existing group housing facilities. However, we also expect that even the most efficient group housing facilities will face at least some conversion costs because the proposition require 24 square feet per cell of space allowance, which is far larger than the typical group housing system in current industry, which is about 20 square feet per cell. And also we consider that some heterogeneity in farm compliance costs because there's some difference in existing facilities and also existing equipment. Using a uniform distribution, we specify the heterogeneity in one-time conversion costs. And after considering conversations with producers and also based on production cost data provided by universities and USDA, we assessed that the most efficient existing group housing facilities will face about $44 per cell of one-time conversion cost, which is actually annualized value. And also the least efficient group housing facilities will face about $110 per cell of one-time conversion costs. And our simulation generates about 7% of the facilities are needed for the California pork demand, which means the marginal converters will face about $59 per cell of one-time conversion costs. I want to remind you that another important feature of the regulation is that it restricts the pork purchase within California. That's why the identity of compliance must be preserved all along the hog and pork supply chain. After conversations with industry people, we learned that segregation and traceability costs are quite significant. And also, I want to remind you that the proposition actually covers only uncooked cuts of pork, although, of course, as you know, there are many pork products. What I mean is ground pork and uncooked sausages are not covered by proposition because they are not pork cuts. And also, cooked pork products, including cooked ham and cooked sausages, are not covered because they are not uncooked. And also, food products using pork as an ingredient and also mixed with many other ingredients are not covered by the proposition. After considering arbitrage and competitive pressure, we expect that most regulation costs will be transferred mainly through compliant hogs and the retail price of uncooked cuts of pork sold in California. And we evaluate about 20 cents per pound of uncooked cuts of pork in terms of incremental processing and marketing costs. To quantify the changes in prices and quantities, we developed a simulation model which describes the full hog and pork supply chain in North America. This slide will help you to understand how our model works. This figure shows the market for uncooked cuts of pork sold in California. As I mentioned before, those products must come from compliant hogs. Because of farm compliance cost, the supply function of the farm output shift up. And also, as I described, because of incremental processing and marketing costs, the derived demand for the farm output will shift down. Both contribute to a quantity decline and also implying farm price will rise and also retail price will rise. Then let's see some numbers. Our simulation reports that the retail price of uncooked cut-off pork sold in California will rise by about 7%, which means 23 cents per pound of the price increase. And also California consumers will buy less about 6% because of the regulation. In other words, California consumers of uncooked cut-off pork will lose about $260 million annually in terms of consumer surplus changes. However, California consumers of non-covered pork will buy a little bit more, specifically about 2% in response to the retail price increase of uncooked cut-off pork sold in California because of the demand substitution effect. Now let's see some effect outside California. Our simulation reports that pork prices and quantities and also retail pork product prices and quantities change very little, mainly because California is a very small market in North America, and also, as I described earlier, because of arbitrage and competitive pressure, most of regulation costs will be transferred mainly through California pork consumers. When we quantify the net loss of producers in North America, it would be about $45 million annually. Actually, it is a quite small number considering that producers' revenue is about $20 billion annually. The proposition gives more space to about 540,000 mother pigs in North America, and at the same time, California consumers of uncooked cut-off pork will lose about $260 million annually. In other words, they will pay about $120 per square foot per sow, which is actually quite expensive considering that even human beings pay at most about dozens of dollars or at most about $100 for renting a house or an apartment in a big city, for example. So actually the proposition is quite expensive in terms of giving spaces to mother pigs. Of course, the proposition 12 is only one option to give more space to mother pigs. And of course, we can think many other policy instruments. To illustrate, we consider distribute $260 million to hog producers through a direct subsidy. One advantage of direct subsidy is that it does not require incremental processing and marketing costs, which is quite significant and substantial according to our analysis. Because of no need of incremental processing and marketing costs, now the $260 million can give more space to about 1.8 million mother pigs in North America, which is quite far bigger than the number of mother pigs covered by the proposition 12. So that means the proposition, of course, can give more space to mother pigs, but it may not quite cost efficient. That's all what I prepared today. Thank you.
Please write me if I understood wrong. But then so you made a kind of displacement analysis, right?
Yeah.
So you made a shift in supply and demand for this market. So where did you get the elasticity from? The elasticity you use this displacement and the most stable was elasticity, where you get what on the
Yeah. Thank you for the questions. Yeah, because I do not have much time because of the time limit. Yeah, of course, we did not estimate the price elasticity, but we review very carefully the literature and use the price elasticity from the prior studies. Yeah, so so that's my quick answer.
So I think your estimation is more like the benefits, how consumer views about these kind of products. So I think it might not be accurate because consumers, especially in the case of California, maybe like they're just not so sensitive to the price of the product. They care more about animal welfare, so that actually probably might exceed like the cost, right?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Actually, the question is very important, and also we actually consider that scenario. What I mean is maybe as you explained, some consumers, they are willing to pay a little bit more for products from compliant homes, and we didn't. I didn't give the results, but actually we did some another simulation scenarios considering some demand shift because of that context, and of course in that scenario, as you can expect it, the of course consumers can get a little bit benefits, and also in that sense, yeah, we can interpret different in that sense, yeah.
Well, then a point to elaborate on a bit in terms of your response is that these valid propositions are being pushed by PETA, Humane Society, and those types of entities which are harmful to all consumers. So there may be an answer as you suggest, but I don't think it's correct to think that the impetus for these types of legislation is coming from the consumer. It's probably people who want specific not it's like general. I think it's, and for me it's different when I know when I realize that even though I'm products, but I might feel bad, for having this much. Because it's not just easy, just for those who care about.
There is the general challenge with that hypothesis in the animal welfare literature is individual consumers, for that matter, represented by retailers or represented by food processors, could make available today here in Anaheim lots of pork labeled as coming from sows that were treated better. And the market share, even in California, of those products is 1/10 of 1%, which suggests that there may be consumers that which is much smaller, for example, than the share of vegan consumers in California. So at the very least, for that product, in the case of pork, people that would like to consume pork don't seem to voluntarily want to take that initiative. And that is a challenge for thinking among pork consumers. It's a big, that's a big push. Unlike eggs, for example, where the voluntary consumption of cage-free eggs is 10 or 12% around the country. In California now it's 100%, not because 100% of the people, they could have voluntarily bought cage-free eggs, they chose not to, but now we voted to impose that on ourselves and our neighbors. Which seems to be, and there are models where people have worked on that. John Bove worked on that sort of stuff. So there does seem to be quite a difference between how people vote and how they consume, and there are rational models for that.
So you have in this slide, you're showing that consumers of non-pork products are increasing the consumption price levels. Earlier, you showed us a slide with the model with supply shift and demand shift. I'm curious if you are thinking of these as two separate markets now, right? So is there a market for uncooked products? And is there, so I guess the question is that you're estimating here a decrease in demand for uncooked cuts and an increase in demand in other market for non-covered products, is that right?
Yeah, for sure. In the simulation model, of course, consider some feedback effect between the two markets, but for illustration, I didn't show, in this figure. Yeah, thank you.
So the sausage, for example, is a non-cooked product.
Right.
And bacon is a cooked product. Bacon's a non-cooked product, sausage is not a cut.
Right.
And clearly bacon, some people think bacon and sausage might substitute.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
On that question.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
The presentation William graduate medal, University of Ukraine.
Choose this one. Share the screen. How we can open this like a full presentation?
So this one.
Yeah.
There on the blue, we have also the page on the bottom.
Oh. Yeah. Oh, and I think I want to share the screen. It's okay.
Yeah. Here.
Oh, this one. Yeah. This one.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So hello everyone, I'm Wilman Iglesias. So I recently graduated from my PhD from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and I'm currently working as a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Arkansas. So I'm originally from Colombia, so that's why understanding the context of my hometown, my country. So this research is related to the effects of a set of anti-drug policies on their this is a policy between the US government and Colombia. And the reason for that is because for the US, cocaine, it's a health social issue. And from the political viewpoint, it's pretty much related to taxation. And in the case of Colombia, it's pretty much a problem related to violence and to the social social issues related to the governance and the lack of state in certain regions of Colombia. And this is pretty much related to the agricultural sector because to produce cocaine, you need the main input, which is coca leaves. So given that that's the main input for the cocaine production system, so that implies that there are farmers involved here. So that's why I'm going to talk about the legal agriculture, so that it's important it's important to point out that I'm going to talk about agriculture as the legal agriculture, those conventional crops, and the coca leaves production, which is the input to produce cocaine, and Colombia is the first producer and the first supplier in the world, and United States the first consumer of cocaine. But for produce cocaine, as I said, you need coca leaves, and that's an agricultural activity at the end of the day. But for our society, that causes huge costs, especially the socioeconomic costs of this, implied even a war on drugs with the criminals performing this activity. Even some estimations from previous studies, they say that around 1% of Colombian annual GDP at least for that period, 2000 and 2008, which will be important for this study. So it's an important issue, and also this contribute to the intentional homicides in Colombia. So that's why, because it's a problem not just for Colombia, but also for the US, they launched this bilateral Plan Colombia. They call it Plan Colombia. It's a policy in which the government of the US government give money to Colombia to combat the traffic of cocaine, and also all the stages of production, starting from the first stage of production is the agricultural activity producing coca leaves. And after, the second stage will be the production in laboratories, labs to produce cocaine, which is the main product. And after that, it will be the commercialization of the product, bringing the cocaine to the US mainly, but also to Europe. In this case, we mainly focus on what happened to the US because this implied an issue for both societies and both governments. So the US foreign military aid, it can be defined like this: aid and diplomatic initiative. The policy, the main purpose is to combat Colombian illegal drug production, organized crime, and drug trafficking. So the motivation for this study is that with this plan, Colombia could reduce coca cultivation from approximately 160,000 hectares to 48,000 hectares from 2000 to 2013. So it's important to know that the plan started in 2000 officially, and at the end of that plan was of that policy was 2015. Officially, because after that we had peace agreement with the FARC, which is one of the main actors producing cocaine. The estimated value of Colombia's drug-related economy shrank from around 7.5 billion in 2008 to 4.5 billion in 2013. So there was a major change in the dynamic of this sector producing cocaine. We compete for resources with the legal agriculture in Colombia, in the rural areas of Colombia. So there were three main strategies to deal with this problem, with the production of cocaine, and also for the production of coca. It was aimed at reducing the coca crops. So those policies were three. The first one, it was the one that they were conducting already, but under the Plan Colombia, they officially, with money from the US, it was an exogenous shock for the budget for the Colombian government to spend more on this strategy to intensify the spraying of with pesticides, just targeting the first stage of production, which is the production of coca leaves. So targeting the farmers, basically that's the idea. After they, in some areas that they couldn't, it was easy to go, and in which they couldn't spray indiscriminately these pesticides. So they went there, and that was a second strategy, and all the efforts were devoted to this particular strategy, which was the manual eradication of coca cultivation. And finally, when there was a very famous president that we had, Uribe. So, and also after he was a president, but when he became a Minister of Defense in 2006, ex-President Santos and his team, they focused the efforts instead of those stages of production. He's economist, by the way. So he thought that it would be better, instead of those first stages of production, it will be more significant to, instead of target the farmer, they target higher stages of production. In particular, they develop strategies and also the resources for the interdiction of cocaine producing laboratories and related facilities. So that was destroying the labs and dismantling these labs, and that was the way that I see it as an economist. This is a demand shock, at least for the coca leaves in Colombia. So this is Colombia, by the way. This is the map of Colombia, in which we have a heterogeneity of the coca leaves production. In particular, I'm going to take advantage of that heterogeneity. There are some, these are departamentos that we call them like that. They are equivalent to the states in the US. And so what we are going to look at is at the GDP, the value of agricultural production, the legal one, to see how that was affected by this set of policies. So the objective of this paper, this research, is to estimate the effect of the central anti-drug policies under that plan, bilateral policy of Colombia and the US on the value of agricultural production of Colombia, cooking, growing departments mainly, to see how that performs. My strategy is basically the sort of difference in difference, but this is a triple differences, in which I'm gonna take advantage of the heterogeneity. I'm gonna define the producers of coca, which they will be the treatment group, and those ones as control group, those ones that never produced coca during the period that I'm analyzing. That's the base group, but beyond, I'm gonna also take advantage of the heterogeneity of the intensity of the production as another variable to consider, which state in this case was, which states were more affected by the policy. So we can see here sort of a visual perspective of what would be the parallel trend assumption. So I just raw data, I put it there. When I divide into the two groups, we can see that before the policy, they follow a similar trend. But what is more important here, that you know, the blue line is related to the coca department, agricultural GDP, and the non-coca departments are the line in red. And when we take the difference, they follow a similar trend before the Plan Colombia started in 2000, and there were, I'm dividing the three different strategies, but here in terms of the budget, and we can see that there are significant changes, not just in the trend of what happened to the GDP, but also in the difference between the coca departments and the non-coca departments. So that's basically the idea. Taking advantage of that, that's why I implemented the diff in diff, but it will be a triple diff in diff. It's important to consider that to make it even more comparable. So the data I'm bringing, I use data from several sources. So the data mainly for the agricultural activity, the legal one, information coming from the National Administrative Department of Statistics, and also all other source of information from the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development of Colombia, and also satellite information about the location of these coca crops and where the coca was located, and that source of information is from the United Nations Office on Drug and Crime. So this is basically what I have done to understand this. I just put the three strategies that I was talking about. And basically what I'm doing is interacting the fact that they produce coca or not, and the timing of each policy, and also after the specification of that variable coca that you can see there, it will be also according to the intensity and the policies. I plug the policies directly in this specification. So I control for several factors, especially state characteristics. Considering many of them, we can talk about that later if you have any questions. So this is just to compare the groups. So they are not similar by definition, but that doesn't matter, because what really matters here is how they change in time. And so the difference is when we are talking about the difference increase between the GDPs after the policies. So that's basically the idea here. And they are pretty much comparable in terms of key variables for both groups to be more comparable. So these are the results. So basically, the main message here is that the more effective policy was the policy in which they destroyed the labs. What the logic behind that? You can target the farmers. They can, if you target the farmer, that is not much effective because they can produce coca in other regions of Colombia. But if you target higher stages of production, such as destroying the labs, dismantling, so that's a demand shock. So they don't have a market to sell the coca leaves, so they have to seek for alternatives, and that's what the evidence of this. I don't have much time to explain this in detail, because even there are many robustness checks here. But the main message here is that it was particularly important after 2007 when they focused on the highest stages of the production in the cocaine production system. So that was more effective, and that it was even effective for increasing the value of agricultural production, especially in those regions that were dedicated to produce coca leaves. And this is the fact that it was not just effective for the agriculture, but the main mechanism here is that the dismantling labs, it's a huge, strike for those producers, especially those guys that they are rich because of this, but they don't provide rural development. But instead, the farmers, they have to seek for alternatives, and with the help of the government, switching to other crops such as cocoa and coffee mainly, which is Colombia is the third now main producer of coffee. So that's basically the idea here. Just as final remarks, for the sake of time, legal agriculture of coca growing departments seems to have benefited from 2007 policy mainly, whereas in departments without coca growing areas were not. So basically, they benefited from the policy. Approximately 2.5% more per year since 2007 due to the interdiction policy. And we have seen that the value of agricultural production in the coca and growing departments gain a monetary benefit that I calculated approximately 284.2 million just because of these policies and not for other reasons that I have control for. Of the average differential increases between those two groups, we can see that in the value of agricultural production across those two type of states in Colombia. So 77% up to 87% can be explained by the policies on the Plan Colombia, and more importantly and more significantly, the interdiction policy contributed to 68% to explain most of the average differential increase among the departments. I mean, the difference between the coca producer, growing departments, and the coca non-growing departments. So that's all what I have. Thank you. So you have any question, they are very welcome. Yes. Yes.
You're evaluating both the production, the coca leaf production,
It's not. It's just the legal agriculture, the GDP. Yeah.
So we don't know then. We don't know, I mean, whether the interdiction must have made the producers of the coca leaf and probably the related communities more soft, right? Because they're even though your volume's going up, reflecting increased legal production, we would have to net that off the production to know the welfare.
Yeah, that's a really good point indeed, because we might think the way that I'm thinking about the coca sector is mainly like a substitute for the other activity as in production, but they are farmers and they are part of the society, so for sure it's a negative effect for the welfare. If we calculate using supply and demand analysis, and we try to get the welfare measured. So for sure that might be considered, but here it's just an approach in which I'm looking at what happened to the legal agriculture. What I'm sure is that many of these farmers, they switch to other activities in time, not necessarily right after, but even complementary to this policy, the government, once they identify where the labs were, so the government went there with the army, and they also provide to those farmers because they don't have that activity. So that's what they did, and that increased the value of all the alternative crops. So that's what I can say, but still I haven't measured the welfare in terms considering how much they lost.
I think that's very interesting, that the destruction of the labs, because in essence, the increased value of legal production is kind of your proxy for the demise of the cocoa production. And so I think it's very interesting result that there wasn't that much action in the first two phases, then they caused that demand shock.
Yeah. Thank you. So, by the way, I have you read the paper, so I have even an analysis in which the income from coca decreased in particular with that policy. So right after that, the government provide them with subsidies to produce the other crops. It's because what I'm saying in this paper is that it wasn't because of the subsidies, but also it was because of the demand shock, mainly the source of the effect, the exogenous shock for their income. And so that's why they had to find alternatives, but it was with the support of the government that they could do it. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And also for the legal crops and also for health issues among the population that they were spraying these. And also, but for me, there is a structural problem there, which is the lack of governance on those regions in particular, because that's the problem of the violence in Colombia. The Max Weber, the philosopher, he said that the lack of governance is if the state doesn't have the monopoly of violence, so we have a huge problem there. And that's what happened in Colombia with the FARC, with the paramilitaries, because they are alternative states for certain rural areas and for the population in those areas. So they compete for the land. The problem is the distribution of land, and there is sort of like a war on not just on drugs, but on the territory, to control the territory. So that's the main issue. And because of that, these policies, they affect, the first one in particular, you said it right, that there are many studies that they provide evidence, suggestive evidence on the fact that they affected the populations in certain ways, even environmental issues, health issues, and in particular, as I'm proving here, the source of income for those populations. They don't want even to produce coca. If they have an alternative, that's better for them because it's an illegal activity. But the problem is that they sell this for the cocaine production system, which a few guys they get rich selling cocaine, especially to the US.
On the variables, the land usage.
Yeah, that's a really good point. As a control, yes, for sure. And the way that I control it initially is that I have the land before all these policies, and I interacted with a trend to see if the changes are not due to that, instead to the policies. And on the other hand, I also control for in metric tons the production of that legal agriculture to weigh the regression, and also that implies that I'm considering the fact that the structural difference between the coca growing departamentos and no coca growing departamentos to make it more comparable. That's the idea.
This variable of the spread of pesticides with the land to see their negative externalities of this cause in the land contribution to and to bring a little more structure to the results.
Yeah, that's interesting indeed. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's a really good point that I want to talk about indeed. So that Colombia has been historically like the first supplier of cocaine. All of us, I think, we know Pablo Escobar and those guys, the Cali cartel, Medellin cartel. So when this happened, in particular, this policy in 2007, they destroyed the labs. So what they did, Mexico entered the scenario and became one of the important suppliers of cocaine to the rest of the world. And there's a study in particular, the study of Mejia and Pascual Restrepo. He's from the MIT and he's from Colombia as well. So they found that in Mexico increased the violence and the mortality due to crime, mainly because financial resources for criminals. So that's a really good point because and this increase and the incentive was always supply and demand, because what happened in Colombia was so important for the rest of the world that the price of cocaine, the street price of cocaine in the US increased a lot, creating incentives somewhere else. So that happened in 2007 in particular. Now, after the peace agreement, they have changed the strategy to come back again to the Arab Spring with all the problems, but I don't know, there might be incentive, especially for the politicians for doing that. But my main message here is that within the illegality, it's not legal activity, but if it is not illegal, so that implies that the best strategy to deal with this problem is to destroy the labs. And that creates even a security, it improves security in those areas. And you have to protect the farmers that they are mainly affected. They don't get much from this production. Instead, the narco traffickers, those guys at the top of the supply chain, so those are the guys that benefit and they don't pay taxes. So if they want to solve the problem, this is a better strategy at least. Even though that my recommendation would be like, let's talk about if it is legal or not, because you can tax as the government. That's happening in the US the whole way with the marijuana, for example, which is legal here in California. So you can produce and you can tax the activity. So that's an important discussion that the two countries have to have. Any other question? Okay, thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kenichi Kuroiwa, and I'm second year PhD student of the University of Georgia. Today, I'm going to present the stronger intellectual property right, encourage agriculture innovation, evidence from the Japanese Plant Variety Protection Act reform. So intellectual property right is very important for economic development. So in agriculture, newly developed plant variety are very crucial for agriculture development. And like a high yield rice variety or winter rice variety or other climate smart varieties is very important for agriculture development. And plant breeders' right is the kind of intellectual property right for especially for plant variety. It is based on the international treaty. It is International Union for the Protection of the New Variety of Plants. And now 80 countries have the Plant Variety Protection Act based on this international treaty, just to encourage the breeding or to develop a new seed. So these are the member countries of the UPOF, and many developed countries participate in this kind of scheme. So previous literature of intellectual property right and innovation, there are kind of two different views about the relationship between intellectual property and innovation. And some people say that patent encourage innovation by granting inventor a stronger property right in the idea. And others say that patent discourage innovation if they reduce the payoff to later innovation who rely on previous invention. And empirical study shows a no and sometimes negative and impact of the intellectual property for plant variety on agriculture innovation. And there are some study which show the positive impact of on agriculture innovation, but the results are mixed. And one paper says that the plant patent played no significant role in encouraging innovation in those breeding industry in the United States. And in Australia, plant variety protection led to a substantial decrease in breeders' output in Australia. So because there are this kind of debate about the intellectual property right and agriculture innovation, my research question is what is the impact of the stronger intellectual property right on agriculture innovation? To analyze the causal impact of the stronger property right on agriculture innovation, I will focus on the reform to strengthen the plant breeders' rights in Japan. And as Japanese government did amendment to give breeders the right to restrict the farmers' self-propagation for specific species. Self-propagation is kind of a farmers' behavior of reuse the seed from the previous harvest. I will explain it later. And but by using this kind of policy change, I try to exploit the variation of the year of the reform, and I also exploit the species affected by the reform. And my main outcome is a number of registration of the plant variety. I will use it as a kind of proxy of agriculture innovation. Let me introduce the institutional background. So Japanese Plant Variety Protection Act is based on the UPOF International Convention Treaty, and it was made in 1979. And the purpose of the law is to promote the developing of good seed or good plant variety. So this kind of system is almost very similar to the patent system. So if for example, seed company develop a new seed or a new variety, they need to application, and after that, the government check the uniqueness of the variety, and if this kind of things are satisfied, and it is registered, and the seed company or the breeder can get intellectual property right, which is called plant breeders' right. And this kind of right can continue for about 30 years. And this law cover almost all of the agricultural products, and so around 70 species are covered in this law. So for example, food crops, so rice and wheat, and vegetable like cabbage and anything, and fruits and apple and any other species are covered in this law. So this is the kind of the number of application and by years. And so one of the issue about this law is that should this law give breeder the right to restrict the farmers' self-propagation? So self-propagation involves the reuse of seed from previous harvest. And I think especially in developing country, and many farmers, like I say, try to use seed from the previous harvest, and and they sometimes they don't buy a seed from the seed company every year. And so the topic is whether the law should restrict this kind of behavior. And it is very problematic for the breeder, especially seed company, because even if they develop a new good plant variety, and the farmer might not buy this kind of new seed. And in the contrast, the farmer says that kind of self-propagation is kind of a traditional practice for farmer, and it is very, if they are restricted, it is very problematic. So even in a developed country, so some country don't give breeders this kind of right. So actually EU, cereal crop and potato, there are no this kind of right for breeder. So in Japan, the plant variety protection didn't give this kind of right for all species before 1998, but due to the kind of amendment of the UPOF treaty, the government did several amendments to give breeders this kind of right for specific species since 1998. So it is a kind of history of the expansion of the restriction of the self-propagation. So in 1998, the government added 37 species like hydrangea and some grass and a mushroom. In 2007, the government added some flower, other flower, and other mushroom, other ornamental tree. And in 2017 and in 2018, they did similar things. And finally, in 2022, the government added all of other species, including a rice and a wheat and a potato and everything. So this is the kind of the image of the restriction. So red bird is kind of the species affected by the reform. So and it cover the law covers 700 species. So in my identification strategy, so I try to exploit this kind of the variation in year and the variation in species. So for the data, I will use two data. One is treatment data. It is raw data because it is necessary to capture the scope of the affected species. And the outcome variable is outcome variable of agriculture innovation is the kind of registration data of the Japanese Plant Variety Protection Act. So because it is the amendment of the law, so the species are clearly specified in the law. So I can check the name of the species in each reform. So in 1998, this kind of thing, it is a Latin name, restricted. It is kind of treatment variable. And for outcome data, I will use the Japanese plant variety protection database. It is administrative data. So it is application or registration based. So it includes the name of the breeder or when is the date of the registration. So by using this kind of administrative data, I try to make species level panel data. So, and the sample size is around 700, and the data cover from 1979 to 2021. And I'm interested in the variable, so the number of new registration per year per species. And okay, and some notes. So in the data there are many zero because some species are very popular, like rice and like some flower are very popular. So there are many registration, but in a minor species there are no or few registration. So there are so many zero in the data in this species panel data. So basic strategy is the difference. And in this analysis, I will focus on the I will focus on the reform of 1998. And my empirical strategy is a normal two-way fixed effect, and YIT is the number of new registration of species I in year T, and a species 1998 is the binary variable, as if the species is a treated species by the 99 amendment, and 0 is otherwise. And I include the post dummy, and I also included species fixed effect and a year fixed effect. And I will use the OLS, and because there are many 0, I will use the Poisson causal maximum likelihood and negative binomial model. And because I have a long data, so I also try to do event study. So year 2 amendment is a kind of a lead and lag variable, and I also included year fixed effect and a species fixed effect. So because I use a DAD, I first check the parallel trend, and there are kind of similar trend. And this is a result of the two-way fixed effect, and in 3 specification, I can see kind of positive impact of the reform on the number of registration. But when I do event study, the result is something like that. So I cannot see upward trend. Before doing analysis, I thought that there might be some kind of dynamic effect of the policy change on agriculture innovation. Because even after the policy change, and it might take time for the, like I say, for breeder or for seed company to develop a new variety. So even if the government restricts the self-propagation for specific species, it might take time, but I cannot see kind of a clear upward trend in an event study. So my conclusion is that I can see kind of the positive impact of the reform on the number of registration in the Japanese PPPA, and it implies that a stronger intellectual property right encourage a kind of agriculture innovation. But there are some limitation in my research. And first of all, selection of the species would not be random at all, because so the rice and wheat were added in this year, and it seems that the government will hesitate to include this kind of species, and and according to the website of the Ministry of Agriculture, they say that they carefully selected the species to prevent, like I say, to prevent harmful impact on agriculture in Japan. So this kind of selection problem might be problematic for my analysis. And the second concern is that there are many other reforms to strengthen the breeder's right. So government tried to extend the period of the protection in the law. So so this kind of impact might also affects the agriculture innovation. And the third problem is the outcome variable, because I can only use the data of this Plant Variety Protection Act, but there are some plant variety which are not registered in this law. So so I cannot see, like I say, all of the agriculture innovation in this data. And the last one is a DID problem, because my outcome variable is kind of a count data. So regular DID, how can I say, strategies sometimes might not be so good. Yeah. This is my presentation. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Mm. Mm. Yeah. I think that, yeah, exactly. I think it is one of the very serious problem for my research. And for example, when they do application, they need to show the parents variety of the new variety. But if they develop the hybrid seed, they want to hide the information of the parents variety. So they don't use this kind of a system. And I think that the public institution usually use this system. I think that to show their activity, and it is a serious problem.
I have two points. Just the first one is related to maybe the way that you frame the problem. The registration is something, but innovation is a different aspect. But maybe you can say more instead of directly assume that the registration is related directly to the innovation. So maybe if you can play with the fact that the probability might change, the probability of innovation, or if you find a way to measure innovation. So it would be interesting if you frame the problem in terms of the probability of And the other thing is because the nature of your BPD, especially the power of the train assumption. So I don't know, I wonder if you, I didn't see the complete paper, but I wonder if you tested with a placebo effect for this case, placebo regression, which instead of using the 1998, use a different years.
I see.
Effectively, it changes. If it's a large part of the data, instead it's because the return changed the picture here.
Yeah, thank you very much.
The same direction of what I think the innovation, one thing that's missing is the theory of innovation. What motivates innovation? The expected returns of the innovation and the probability of success. Our kids are not controlling for the expected returns of innovation. So it would be interesting instead the relative price for products or for a group of products to control those aspects. Those change in relative price cause a bias in this stage.
I see. Yeah.
And it can explain your results today events, for example.
I see. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much for coming to our session. And, thank you very much. Hi. Hi. Yeah.
So I moved to synthetic control.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I didn't try, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you can.
Oh, yeah.
When you have some issues. with
Yeah.
it.
Mhm. Oh,
So I use, there is like traditional synthetic control method. For one I use is synthetic control method using glass.
oh.
So there is the variety of.
Thank you, guys. I will. So you use the synthetic control for your research? Oh. Wow.
I'm very interested personally. I mean, actually, that's the one of my. Religious stuff. I mean, yeah, I mean, that's my. I think it's one of my.
Car. It's the one, but I don't think you missing. It's not just, you can just check synthetic control.
Oh, I think oh, your name? Oh, you're the teaching.
I graduated last year.
Oh, okay, I see. Oh, I see. Well, interesting. So, yeah, I think. Great. Yeah. Fine. What is your research futures? Ah,
My email is my
oh. Yeah, thank you for, yeah, thank you.